Sometime in 1531, after his participation in the ravaging and subjugation of Mexico along Cortes, the Spanish conquistador Diego de Ordaz entered the Orinoco River and traveled all the way into the Venezuelan heartland. After hearing of the attempts of infiltrating the territory from the west, both hosts looking for the same thing: Manoa, a name that in its mythical nature let it change and evolve several times, and today many people know simply as El Dorado. These days, the mystery of El Dorado is largely well understood. It is almost certain that the legend originated with the rituals of the Muisca people on the Colombian highlands. But how exactly did such a legend propagate it so far away that when the Spanish landed on Venezuela, 1,500 kilometers away, they learned about it? In fact, we know, thanks to the modern understanding of anthropology and related sciences, that the indigenous peoples of what would later become Colombia and Venezuela were probably involved in a huge and complex wave of trade for goods. One obvious evidence of it is that the Muisca people had no real access to gold on their territory, so they had to trade with someone for it. And if there's something we know, is that trade functions as a gateway for information, spreading it and distorting it as it travels along with goods and crafts, and especially with people. So it shouldn't be surprising if the indigenous civilizations settled on Venezuela had knowledge of the Muisca traditions. We just don't know what they knew about it. Maybe they too thought that El Dorado meant a city, and not a man in a specific ritual. We simply can't tell with what we know today. But, in any case, it's in this context that I want to begin to tell Venezuela. It was on this complexly divided territory that the Europeans sighted for the first time the continent, the year 1499. I said complexly divided because, even though generally speaking, Carib tribes would occupy the coastal and eastern lands of Venezuela, there are many examples of them well inside the territory and into the west. The same goes for Arawak people. On his third voyage, Columbus took a deep turn south, sailing first not to the Canary Islands as before, but instead traveling further to the Cape Verde Islands off the coast of Africa. Here, they replenished the ships to start a slow and excruciating crossing of the Atlantic due to the weak winds until the 31st of July, when water started running low and tension was building up deck. But then, finally, 3 hills were spotted at the distance that day, a vision of relief that prompted Columbus, in his Catholic fervor, to name this new land as La Isla de la Trinidad, in honor to a vow taken to the Holy Trinity, and today we simply call it Trinidad. It's in those few days that the size of the exploration encountered got imprinted into Columbus's mind as the proof of the existence of the earthly paradise. First, the ships were having a horrible time navigating against the current. Then later they would find it was fresh water in what seemed open sea. Probably no river was known to any European capable of diluting seawater to such extent, so Columbus thought maybe he was navigating upwards, like climbing up a hill. Perhaps inspired by Dante's description of a mountain of purgatory at the opposite side of Italy protruding from the earth, with the Garden of Eden and its 4 rivers located at its top. He, of course, Didn't know how far away from the antipodal point of Italy he was really, but looking at the exuberant flora and fauna framing the mouths of what appeared to be a gigantic river, he must have thought he had had an eureka moment. So he named the territory Tierra de Gracia, the land of grace. The exploration stayed at what was named now the Gulf of Paria between the 4th and the 10th of August. It is believed that the exploration made landfall at the current site of Macuro. Other than secondary sources, there's no way of confirming if this was the only time Columbus set foot on the continent. They named the northern strait of the Gulf Boca de Dragones, the dragon's mouth, and the southern one Boca de Serpientes, due to the unpredictable streams that would form whirlpools, seriously endangering the safety of the exploration. After exiting to the Caribbean to the north, and probably guided by the evident wealth of pearls that the natives displayed, and maybe even shared with them, the ships arrived at the islands of Coche, Cubagua, and Margarita, where, without a doubt, they had contact with the locals, getting 3 whole bags of fine pearls to show off at the court. His stay was short though, heading fast at Hispaniola because of a failing health. In some writings, he would later argue that only a continent, and not just a big island like Zipango, could accommodate a river so large and powerful enough to account for what he witnessed. But he would retract the idea soon afterwards, convince himself that he was at the West Indies. This first contact, heavily romanticized later, was the first invitations for explorers into a vast new land. The legacy of this brief encounter goes beyond, nevertheless, as on one of those ships, a young Bartolomé de las Casas got to see the continent for the first time, and then he would return to these lands with what amounted to him as an important and holy mission. He would eventually call this place home, becoming one of the most important historical figures of the period. But indeed he wasn't the only one to fall for what Columbus described as the land of grace, where I found the mildest of temperances, and the land and the trees very green and as beautiful as in April in the orchards of Valencia. Indeed, so many other explorers chose this inviting coast as the starting point of the long and eventful exploration into this vastly unknown foreign new continent, with the first real attempts to settle began on an island and an estuary, both with rights to be called the first permanent European settlement on South America.